In this video, I share with you 2 campaign games that our gaming group stopped to move on to previous older campaign games. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of September of 2025, we have $100 going towards a crowdfunding campaign, which my Patreon supporters will be voting upon. Go ahead and use the link below to go to my Patreon page where you can get in on this month's gratitude gifts. It only takes $1, and hopefully we'll be filling out the GGGG list as the month goes along. So one of my favorite board game genres is campaign dungeon crawlers, where in particular you can level up your heroes and gain new abilities. That's a dynamic that I really enjoy from original RPGs as well as video games. But as my favorite sort of genre of board games, I'm always on the lookout for some good campaign games, even though they take a lot longer and they're a bigger commitment. So some ones in the past have been Gloomhaven, Oathsworn, Descent 3, and a variety of others. And more recently, I received 2 campaign games that I really wanted to give a try. And I just want to say right off the bat that probably other folks really like these games, but they ended up not being for our group, and we stopped after giving it a good try. I wanted to like these games. I was predispositioned to like these games and was excited about it, but eventually came to the conclusion that we wanted to stop playing and go back to some classics that we have enjoyed in the past. So the first one is Harakiri, Blades of Honor. I went all in on that, and our game group started a campaign, and similar to what most modern dungeon crawlers have, it has an overland map portion of the game and then being in one of the dungeons. And because it was Japanese themed, I was pretty excited. And there's a pretty in-depth storyline that really is intriguing and gives you motivations for why you're going about with your heroes, trying to stop the antagonist and his desire to conquer the world. So there is that epic nature and feel. Similar to Tanaris Adventures, I felt like that had an epic storyline where you're trying to save the world from invasion. So similarly, Harakiri, I felt like had a growing storyline that felt intriguing to me. Each of the heroes that you play, they have really interesting dynamics with each other. So was super intrigued by that. Unfortunately though, it felt half-baked in terms of game testing, because a number of the scenarios were either too easy or almost impossible to win. And a couple of them, we just didn't understand what we were supposed to do or how the rules actually worked, especially in the overland map portion of it. So it just felt like the results were going to be predetermined about whether or not you could actually accomplish it. Now, for the most part, you can fail forward in the overland map phase, but once you're in the dungeon, if you fail, you just start over again and you have to work through it. Well, I think it was in the 6th or 7th scenario, we just could not pass the dungeon portion of it. And try as we might, we reset twice, we tried, and it was just impossible. This is a scenario where you're split up into two groups, and it just, I don't know how you win that. So that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, where our group and myself in particular just felt like it just wasn't done. It had not been play tested enough, and it was just so rough that the experience was just unenjoyable. And we just didn't want to progress further, even though the storyline was really good. Another complaint that I have about that game is that you have separate rules, or rules that are enough off from the overland experience to the dungeon that I sort of wish they had completely separated the rules for overland and as opposed to being in the dungeon, because it just made it confusing. Like, for example, the number of actions that you have when you're on the overland map versus what you have down here. You're using the same action tokens, but you have a different number. There's just a ton of those small examples of where the rules were always confusing, And I felt like every single game we were discovering that we were playing something wrong. So I just felt like it was very difficult to get the rules down in that game correctly. And it just felt strange that it was so different between the two scenarios. So I sort of wish they had a completely different rule set, because it would have been easier, honestly, to have two different rules, because they were just similar enough that it caused even more confusion. So all of that combined, even though I went all in on my pledges, we boxed it up, I reset the game, I'll probably be selling it at some point, but we just gave up. Instead, we decided to go back to a classic, and that is Shadows of Brimstone Forbidden Fortress. In fact, when we were playing Harakiri, we were using the miniatures from Forbidden Fortress because I had painted up a gajillion of them. If you want to see that video, go ahead and check it out here. Long viewers of my channel know that I went all in with the original Forbidden Fortress over a decade ago. I think it was published in 2014, but I think their Kickstarter was like 2011 maybe. It was a couple of years late, but I loved that game. And since then, Flying Frog has come out with a number of new iterations, but I did go all in with the Forbidden Fortress, and I did bling that game similarly to how I did with Shadows of Brimstone by creating a whole system to keep track of all of the map tiles with the appropriate encounter cards, all that kinds of stuff. And I had painted up every single miniature from the Shogun Pledge level. But I had actually never had an opportunity to play that game. I think I had received it in 2018, I want to say, was when it delivered or came out or was made available. But for the last 7 years, I've been looking for an opportunity to play the game. So we decided, hey, we're playing this Japanese themed game. We didn't end up liking it, so let's go ahead and play Forbidden Fortress. My gaming group had never played Shadows of Brimstone, so they didn't know what to expect, but after just even one introductory gameplay that we had for the first scenario, they absolutely love it. And we all like the fact that there is a branching upgrade tree that you get for every single hero. It's always exciting to draw new gear cards, all that kinds of stuff. The rules are relatively clean and simple, not super complicated. And since I blinged out everything, shout out to Steve Hernandez. He actually translated the original hex crawl for Shadows of Brimstone to work with Forbidden Fortress. And I am so glad for that, because if I were to criticize Shadows of Brimstone, the whole system, is that there is no narration. There is no story. There's actually no real motivation for why you're going into these mines to get more Darkstone, other than to level up your character. At least Gloomhaven, the original, had a little bit of a storyline for why you were going to these different towns and stuff. It was so minimal that eventually I wasn't even paying attention to the story. But I need just that little amount at least to hold together why we're doing all of this. Hexcrawl is one of the best fan-made game editions that I've ever seen. And I'm so glad that Steve converted all of that to work with Forbidden Fortress. So even though that game system is over 10 years old and Forbidden Fortress is 7 years old, I went through a couple of campaigns with the original Shadows of Brimstone. I recently did a video for Valhalla when that came out, and I also went all in with their most recent Kickstarter, which is the Egyptian themed sort of pulp alley kind of theme, and definitely looking forward to the Hell Train. The second game that we abandoned is actually Arydia, The Paths We Dare Tread. Now, I really wanted to like this game a lot. I had waited for it for a long time. It was one of the rare Kickstarters that I sort of followed with the updates. And I just really respect the creators of Arydia. I felt like this was a passion project for them and they put their heart into it. The production quality was out of this world, and so really wanted to like this game. In particular, what I liked was that it's a blind box in terms of pre-painted miniatures. So almost like an advent calendar, you were instructed to open up a little section of the box to pull out these pre-painted enemies that you didn't know what it looked like until you got to that situation. So all of that is good and fine, but at the end of the day, there was just so much stuff going on with very little resolution. And the open sandbox nature of the game made it such that there was just too many unresolved side quests that we just lost track of what was supposed to go with what. And we ended up exploring the entire first board, but got stuck with knowing what to do. So I know that it's really hard to create a true sandbox, sort of open world kind of board game, because you have to account for so many different choices and variability that a group can make. I think the team gets an A for trying, but it just was too open, and I felt like none of the objectives or side quests actually resolved before more was introduced. So by the end of when we quit, even though we had uncovered the entire map, we had not resolved most of the quests that we had received. And we didn't know what to do next. So it was the kind of situation that we were frustrated, even though, again, it seemed like the storyline was pretty good and the characters that we were interacting with was fairly interesting. You really need to write down everything and keep notes of every location and what you did in each location, which our game group didn't do. And you need to be willing to sort of turn to cheat codes similar to video games, where when you get stuck, you look up the walkthrough to figure out what you missed or what you're supposed to do next. I feel similar that you have to look up on the internet what you're supposed to do. So I don't know. I don't mind doing that for video games, but I don't want to be doing that for board games. And I just felt like it was too open. There wasn't enough sort of linear options that you can have. I thought Oathsworn did this the best, where you do have different options, but it always all went back. The storyline always went back to the boss battle. So the story, I felt like, went like this, where you have different options that would go through different paths and would have consequences later on, but at least it would come back to a certain point that everyone knew that you were supposed to go towards this point. So somewhat semi-linear in that fashion, but with Arydia, it's just like this. And there's no resolution to any of these storyline strings that are going on, and I found that to be really frustrating. So I boxed the whole thing, I ended up selling it. That game group switched over to Chronicles of Drunagor, Age of Darkness. Now, I was a backer of the original Chronicles of Drunagor, but I ended up selling that game after only a couple of gameplays, because the enemies really didn't feel distinct from one another. And some of the game mechanics I felt like didn't work very well. But since then, with the second iteration of Age of Darkness, they had fixed a lot of that. They had introduced new kinds of enemies so that there's more variety and more dynamics, while maintaining probably the best part of that game, which is how many upgrade options you get. And what I love about that system is after sort of every major adventure, you get some kind of upgrade. Even if it's small, you have a choice of increasing one of your abilities. And there are a ton of different abilities and choices that you can have. So that's super satisfying for me, for someone who likes leveling up. Both Shadows of Brimstone and Chronicles of Drunagor are really, really good with their upgrade system. Where Chronicles of Drunagor, I think, has more of a frequency of upgrading different parts of your hero. We're playing sort of the prequel adventure scenarios right now before we go into Age of Darkness, but we've been having a lot of fun doing that, and so that has been super exciting. Finally, I have to mention my more recent videos that I've come out with. Obviously, I am DMing or being the director for Draw Steel. And again, my players who have been playing that really love how much power that they are starting out with at level 1. And so that's sort of another example, even though it's a true RPG rather than a board game, it sort of plays like a board game because of how tactical it is, and you need that grid in order to play out your battles. So I am loving these 3 games that I'm immersed in right now with 3 different game groups. And who would have thought that I would be turning back to some of the more older games and preferring them over some of the newer ones that's happening right now. Go ahead and make a comment below if you have experienced some campaign games that you ended up abandoning because it wasn't as good as you thought, or what your thoughts are on both Harakiri as well as Arydia, and whether you would enjoy Shadows of Brimstone, Forbidden Fortress in particular, or Chronicles of Drunagor, Age of Darkness. Hit the like button and subscribe. And again, go to my Patreon page if you're interested in getting in on this month's gratitude gifts. Otherwise, happy gaming. We'll see you next time.